My name's James Harper, and I'm a 52-year-old writer. Life, for me, was a routine of words and quiet evenings in my small but comfortable home. I had everything I thought I ever needed. My writing career was going well, nothing earth-shattering, but steady. I had a roof over my head, a cup of coffee to start my day, and Laura, my ex-wife, had been my partner for 25 years. We met in college when we were both young and idealistic and somehow managed to build a life together. I thought we had it all. But like most things in life, things change and I never saw it coming. Laura left me. At first, it didn't make sense to me. She said her feelings had faded over the years. Her reasoning was simple enough: she couldn't stay with someone who didn't offer the stability she needed. I tried to understand it. She explained that she needed more than I was able to provide, but there was something about the way she said it, something about the words she chose, that didn't sit right with me. For years, I had thought we were solid. Of course, we'd had our struggles, what marriage didn't? But I never thought we were in trouble. We had our moments of happiness, the good times when everything felt easy. But now, looking back, I couldn't help but feel that maybe I had been blind to the cracks in our relationship. It was hard to admit to myself, but I couldn't ignore the possibility that she might have been slipping away for a long time. When Laura left, she made it clear that I was the problem. She said I couldn't give her what she needed. I wasn't enough for her anymore. At first, I tried to tell myself that maybe I had become complacent, that maybe I had failed her in some way. After all, you hear these things all the time. The marriage gets stale, the excitement fades, and one partner falls out of love. But when Laura walked out the door, I felt like there was a part of the story that she wasn't telling me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper, something more complex at play. For the first few months after the separation, I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the emptiness that settled into our home. Writing became my refuge. I'd sit at my desk and pour everything into the pages of my books, escaping into worlds of fiction where everything made sense. But no matter how much I focused on my work, I couldn't stop thinking about Laura. It wasn't just the fact that she left, it was the way she left, with her carefully chosen words, the way she claimed it was all my fault. She had always been the strong one, the one who made decisions, the one who always seemed to know what she wanted. I, on the other hand, had always been a little lost in her shadow. Laura had been my rock. Now she was gone, and I couldn't help but wonder if there was something more to her decision than just falling out of love. Something that went deeper than the surface reasons she had given me. It wasn't until months later, at a family gathering, that everything changed. That's when I discovered something that made me question everything I thought I knew about our marriage. It was a Sunday afternoon and the family had gathered at my sister's house. It was one of those rare occasions where everyone was in town and we were all together under one roof. The conversation was light, everyone catching up on life, and I did my best to keep my mind off the lingering sense of loss I'd been carrying around since Laura left. It was at the kitchen table when I noticed something strange. Laura had left her phone on the counter, her purse beside it. At first, I didn't think much of it. It wasn't unusual for her to leave her phone unattended. After all, she and I had been married for years and we had nothing to hide from each other, or so I thought. But as I walked by, I saw the phone light up. A message from someone named Robert, a colleague of Laura's. The message read, "I can't wait to see you tonight. Let's make it a private date." I froze. Robert? Who was Robert? Why had she never mentioned him before? The message was casual enough, but the implications hit me like a ton of bricks. Private date? My mind raced. What did that mean? I wasn't the type to go snooping through someone's things, but this wasn't just some random text. It was a message that felt like a slap in the face, something I couldn't ignore. I couldn't help myself. I picked up the phone and unlocked it even though I knew it was a huge violation of trust. As I scrolled through the conversation, my heart sank further. The messages weren't just professional banter, they were filled with flirtation, inside jokes, and references to personal meetings outside of work. It was clear that there was something going on between them, something that I hadn't known about. At that moment, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just let this go. But at the same time, I wasn't sure if I was overreacting. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But something in my gut told me that I wasn't being paranoid. The pieces were falling into place in a way I couldn't ignore. When Laura returned to the kitchen, I confronted her. She looked at me, confused at first, then her face twisted into something I didn't recognize. Her eyes darted to her phone, and before I could say anything more, she quickly grabbed it from me. "What's this?" I asked, my voice tight with frustration. Laura, for the first time since the separation, seemed caught off guard. "James, it's nothing," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "You're just being too suspicious." "Too suspicious?" I repeated, my voice rising. You're texting someone about a private date and I'm the one who's too suspicious? She met my gaze, her expression a mixture of frustration and guilt. It's nothing. I can explain everything. It's just a colleague, someone from work. You're overreacting. But her words didn't sit right with me. I wanted to believe her, I wanted to trust her. But the more I thought about it, the more the pieces of our life together began to shift in my mind. The small things that never seemed significant before suddenly felt like clues. The late nights at work, the way she'd become more distant, the secrecy surrounding her phone and her whereabouts. All of it pointed to something I couldn't ignore. She was hiding something. And deep down, I knew that her reasons for leaving weren't just about falling out of love. There was something more, something I had missed. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what that was. After the confrontation, Laura and I both retreated to our corners of the house. She was visibly shaken, but I couldn't quite tell whether it was guilt or frustration that caused her unease. I, on the other hand, felt something much deeper, a sickening knot in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't shake, and a growing realization that the woman I thought I knew, my partner, my wife, might not be the same person I had spent 25 years with. I wanted to believe Laura. I wanted to believe that this was all some misunderstanding or that I had read too much into a casual message. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The pieces of our life together, the years of marriage, seemed to be crumbling before my eyes. There was a distance between us now, one that had been growing for a while, but I had been too focused on everything else to see it. Looking back, there were signs I hadn't noticed before, things I had brushed off or convinced myself were nothing more than coincidences. Laura had started working longer hours at the office about 6 months before she left. At first, I thought it was just a busy period. After all, her career was important to her. But then it became a regular occurrence. She'd come home late, exhausted, and not in the mood for conversation. I began to notice that her phone was always face down, always out of sight, as if it were some sort of secret she was keeping from me. In the past, she had never been that guarded with her phone. We had always shared our lives openly, no locked screens, no hidden messages. It wasn't until recently that I started noticing the subtle changes, the way she would quickly close an app or message when I walked into the room, how she would claim she was too tired to talk or that she had to finish up work. Little things like that, things that I now realized were a mask for something she didn't want me to see. But what really stuck with me were the small moments when she would avoid eye contact, when her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and when I would ask her how her day went, and she would deflect the question with an awkward laugh. I had grown accustomed to those answers, convinced they were just a product of the mundane, everyday life we had built together. I didn't question them. But after the incident with the phone, everything changed. I couldn't let go of that feeling, the one that told me something was being hidden from me. It wasn't just about the message from Robert. It wasn't just about Laura staying late at work. It was about the way she had started pulling away, the way her presence in the house felt more like a shadow than the woman I had once shared everything with. It wasn't just physical distance either. Emotional distance was creeping in too. She had started avoiding deeper conversations, the ones we used to have over dinner or on lazy Sunday mornings when we talked about everything, our dreams, our fears, the future. Now it was all surface-level chatter. At family gatherings, when I would ask her questions about work or the kids, she would either brush me off with a half-hearted answer or change the subject entirely. When I'd comment on something small, like how I was thinking about finishing the manuscript I'd been working on for years, she would nod politely but seem uninterested, as if the person who used to encourage me wasn't even there anymore. It was like living with a stranger. But it wasn't until I started digging deeper, doing something I never thought I would, that the pieces really began to come together. One night, after another quiet dinner where Laura's silence had been almost unbearable, I found myself pacing around the house. She had gone to bed early and I was left alone with my thoughts. My gut was telling me something wasn't right, and it had been for a while, but I hadn't trusted my instincts. I was starting to see everything clearly now. I had become so caught up in the small things that I had failed to see the bigger picture. I stood by her desk, looking at the mess of papers and books scattered across it. I tried not to feel guilty, but I knew that this was my only way of getting the answers I needed. I picked up her laptop. It was risky. It felt like a betrayal in itself. But the curiosity gnawed at me, and I had to know if there was more to this than I had been willing to admit. As soon as I opened the laptop, I could feel the weight of my actions. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I couldn't stop now. I checked her emails first, her inbox full of work-related messages, but then I found something that made my blood run cold. There was an email thread with Robert. They had been communicating privately, exchanging flirtatious banter about personal meetings and how excited they were to see each other. One of the emails stood out in particular. "I can't wait to hold you again, Laura. I miss you." I felt the ground beneath me shift. I couldn't breathe. It was all there, clear as day. This wasn't just a colleague. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Laura had been involved with Robert for longer than I had realized. The affair wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. And it had been going on for months. I couldn't stop reading the messages, each one cutting deeper into me. The words they exchanged, the in*mate nature of their conversations made it painfully clear that she had been seeing him behind my back while I was still in the dark. I wasn't angry yet though. Anger would come later. Right now all I felt was numbness, complete disbelief. I had been living with this lie, with the belief that everything had just fallen apart on its own, that Laura had simply outgrown me. But the truth was staring me in the face. She had never outgrown me. She had just found someone else. Someone she wanted more than me. I sat there frozen. I didn't even know how long I had been looking at the screen. Finally, I slammed the laptop shut. I needed to process everything, but I couldn't. Not yet. The next few days were a blur. Laura came and went, continuing with her usual routine, unaware that I had uncovered the truth. She acted like everything was fine, but I couldn't look at her the same way. I couldn't pretend that I didn't know what was really going on. I thought about confronting her, but something held me back. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers right then and there. But another part of me knew that there was no point. She had already made her choice, and it wasn't me. I decided to keep quiet for now, not out of fear but out of a desire to let things unfold on my terms. I couldn't stop the flood of emotions that came rushing at me, but I could control how I responded. And at that moment I wasn't ready to react, I was ready to plan. The days after I uncovered Laura's betrayal were a strange mix of numbness and quiet devastation. I went through the motions of life, pretending that nothing had changed, but deep down, I knew that everything had shifted. I could feel the weight of her lies pressing down on me, and every moment I spent in the same house as her felt like a lie I had to keep pretending to believe. She acted as though everything was fine, and I guess that was the hardest part. I could see it in the way she would smile, forced, practiced. The way she would ask me how my day had gone, the way she would stand a little too far from me when we were sitting together. The space between us was growing wider, and I could feel it in my bones. I had become a stranger to her, and she to me. But I couldn't confront her yet. Something told me I needed to wait for the right moment, and more than that, I needed to be sure. I needed the cold, hard facts. Not just the things I had read in her emails, but the truth laid out in front of me in a way that would leave no room for doubt. And so, I waited. I decided to give myself some time to figure out what to do. I wasn't sure if I should confront her, leave, or even what I would say. I just knew that I couldn't continue living in this house with the knowledge of her betrayal hanging over me. I needed answers, and I needed to make sure I had all the facts before I acted. But as the days wore on, I could feel the pressure building inside me. It was like a slow burn, an ember that wouldn't die, growing hotter and hotter until I couldn't take it anymore. Every night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led up to this moment. I thought about how much I loved her, how much I had trusted her, and how easily she had thrown it all away. Finally, I decided I had to know the full extent of what was going on. It wasn't like me to go behind Laura's back. I had always trusted her, had always believed in our marriage. But the part of me that had once been naive, the part that believed people in love didn't hurt each other, had died that night when I read those emails. That night when I saw the evidence that everything I had believed about us was a lie. So I did something I never thought I would do. I decided to check her phone. It was wrong, I knew that. But I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut telling me that I needed to know the truth. I needed to see it for myself. And that night, when Laura went out to meet her friends for what was surely another excuse to see Robert, I knew that this would be the moment. When she left, I didn't hesitate. I picked up her phone, unlocked it with the passcode I had known for years, and started looking through her messages. The feeling in my chest was like a vice tightening around my heart. Every message, every word I read felt like a stab, but I couldn't stop. I needed to see it all. I started scrolling, looking for any shred of evidence that might change things. But I already knew what I would find. It didn't take long before I stumbled across a new thread of messages. This time, the exchange was between Laura and Robert. The conversation was steamy, filled with flirtatious banter and explicit messages about meeting up. There was one message that stood out to me, a message that made my stomach turn. Robert had written, "I can't wait to hold you again. It's been too long." My heart dropped into my stomach. I had already known, but seeing the words on the screen, in black and white, was like a punch to the gut. It was real. This wasn't some small flirtation. This wasn't a mistake. Laura had been having an affair with Robert for months. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My mind was spinning as I read through the rest of the messages. They weren't just talking about physical in asterisk Macy. They were talking about their plans to go away together. They had made plans to meet, to get away from the city and spend time alone. They were in love and they had been for a long time. I could feel the walls closing in around me. I had always trusted Laura. I had always believed in her. But now that trust was shattered. I had been living a lie. I slammed the phone down onto the table, my hands shaking. I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed to do something. I needed to confront her. But a small part of me still held back. I didn't want to tear everything apart. I didn't want to acknowledge the truth that was staring me in the face. But there was no denying it. Laura had been lying to me for months, hiding a part of her life that I had never known about. The next few hours were a blur. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept replaying the messages in my head, seeing Robert's name, seeing the affection they shared, seeing the future they had planned together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go to Laura and demand an explanation. But I knew that it wouldn't change anything. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. I tried to calm myself down. I tried to think about what to do next, but there was nothing I could do that would fix this. It was broken. My marriage was broken and I didn't know how to put it back together. By the time Laura came home, I was exhausted, emotionally drained. I had spent the entire evening stewing in my own anger, unable to focus on anything else. When she walked through the door, I didn't greet her. I didn't even look at her. She asked me how my evening had gone and I barely muttered a response. She could tell something was wrong. The air between us was thick, heavy with unspoken words. But I couldn't bring myself to speak yet. I needed more time. More time to process everything. She went to bed early again that night, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, knowing that things were about to change. I couldn't go on living in this house with the knowledge of what she had done. I couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. I had a decision to make. The next day, I woke up with a sense of finality. The truth was no longer a looming question in my mind. I had seen the evidence, felt the raw sting of it deep in my gut. There was no going back now. I had never imagined that I would find myself in a situation like this, but life had a cruel way of throwing the most unexpected twists our way. And now I had to face the consequences. For weeks, I had been walking through life as though I could still pretend everything was fine. I had told myself that maybe the distance between Laura and me was just a phase, that maybe this was just something temporary. But I had been lying to myself. And now that the truth had been laid bare, I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I had to make a choice. The anger I had been holding in finally broke free. It wasn't the kind of rage that made you want to scream or lash out. No, it was quieter than that, more insidious. It was the kind of anger that simmered inside you, making you question everything about yourself, about your relationship, about what you thought you knew. It made me feel small, as though I had spent all this time building something that was never really there in the first place. But I wasn't going to let it consume me. I wasn't going to let Laura's betrayal define who I was. No, I was going to do something about it. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her walk away with Robert, pretending everything was fine. I had been a fool for far too long, and now it was time for her to see what she had lost. I didn't tell her anything right away. In fact, I didn't say a word to her about the phone, about the messages, or about the affair. I wanted to keep things calm, composed. If I confronted her right away, if I gave in to the urge to accuse her, I knew it would only make everything messier. I had to play this carefully. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo. Laura and I spoke, of course, but it was all surface-level stuff. She didn't seem to notice anything was different. She acted like everything was fine. She kept asking me about my work and my writing. She tried to make small talk, but I could tell she was nervous. It wasn't hard to tell. The air between us was thick with tension, and every time she looked at me, there was a hint of guilt in her eyes. I didn't let it show. I didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing that I knew. I wanted to keep her in the dark. Let her think that I had no idea what was really going on. But as the days passed, something began to shift in me. I realized that I wasn't just angry anymore. I was hurt, deeply hurt. Betrayal had a way of cutting to the core of who you were, and I was starting to feel it in ways I hadn't anticipated. The trust one had placed in Laura in our marriage had been shattered. And now I was left to pick up the pieces. I thought about what to do. What was the right move here? Should I confront her? Should I confront Robert? Should I just pack my things and leave, disappear into the night without any explanation? None of those options felt right. I didn't want to walk away and let Laura off the hook. I didn't want her to think she could do something like this and just move on, leaving me in the dust. No, I needed to make her understand the gravity of what she had done. And if that meant getting a little revenge, then so be it. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt her for the sake of hurting her. It wasn't about making her feel as bad as I did. No, this was about reclaiming my life. This was about taking control of the situation instead of letting it control me. Over the next week, I kept my distance. I focused on my writing, buried myself in the work that had always been my refuge. I couldn't let Laura's infidelity distract me from what I had built. But in the back of my mind, I was planning. I was thinking about how I could make sure that she understood the consequences of her actions. I didn't want her to just feel guilty. I didn't want her to cry and beg for forgiveness. No, that would be too easy. I wanted her to see what she had thrown away, to understand that she hadn't just destroyed our marriage, but a life that we had spent years building together. I started to change things in small ways. I went to the bank and made sure that everything was in order for the divorce. I began reaching out to a few friends, making plans to reconnect, to surround myself with people who knew me as James, the man I was before all this. I started to focus on myself, on my future, and on the possibility of something better. But I wasn't done with Laura yet. Not by a long sh*t. One afternoon I received an invitation. It was a wedding invitation. I opened the envelope and stared at the name written on it. Robert, Laura's colleague, the man she had been seeing behind my back. He was getting married. To Laura. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I considered ignoring the invitation. After all, why should I show up to the wedding of the man who had taken my wife from me? But as the days passed, my curiosity grew. I couldn't help myself. I needed closure. I needed to see it all for myself, to see Laura walk down the aisle with him. To see her, the woman I had loved for so long, marry someone else. And so I went. I dressed in my best suit, the one I had worn for every special occasion. I made sure I looked sharp. When I arrived at the venue, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. I wasn't the one who had lost everything. I wasn't the one who was walking away from this marriage, pretending that it had never meant anything. No, I was going to show up to make sure Laura knew that I had moved on. And when I saw her, standing at the altar, looking radiant and beautiful, I realized something. She wasn't the same woman I had married. She was someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. And that was when I knew this was my time. This was the moment when I would take back control of my life. The wedding was everything I had imagined it would be: beautiful, flawless, and deeply painful. I walked into the venue, blending into the crowd of well-wishers and friends. The room was adorned with white flowers, soft lights casting a warm glow over everything. The air was thick with joy and celebration, and yet I couldn't shake the sense of dissonance that clung to me like a second skin. Laura looked radiant, as she always did on such occasions. But there was something different about her today. Something that felt foreign. She was the bride, standing beside Robert, smiling for the cameras, looking as though she had just stepped out of a fairy tale. She looked every bit the woman I had loved, the woman who had once been everything to me. But standing there, witnessing her with Robert, I couldn't ignore the deep sense of loss that filled me. She hadn't noticed me yet. In fact, she seemed to avoid eye contact as I stood off to the side, observing from a distance. The look in her eyes when she caught sight of me briefly as I took my seat in the back of the room made it clear she knew I was there, but she didn't acknowledge my presence. She seemed to pretend that I was invisible. And that stung more than I had anticipated. I wasn't the man she had once looked at with love. I wasn't even a shadow of the person I had been in her eyes. And for a moment I questioned whether she had ever truly seen me at all. Robert stood by her side, a smug smile on his face, clearly relishing the moment. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his posture so self-assured that I almost felt like he was rubbing his victory in my face. But in truth, it was more than just arrogance. It was a facade, a carefully constructed image of someone who had taken what was mine. And as I looked at him, I realized that this man who had betrayed me by taking my wife, wasn't happy. Not truly. He couldn't be. I tried not to let the bitterness bubble to the surface, but it was hard to ignore the fact that, just a few months ago, Laura had been mine. We had built a life together, worked through the ups and downs, and made plans for a future. And now that life was shattered. Her vows, which had once been exchanged with me, were now being offered to someone else. And she seemed so eager to make that transition, as though I had never mattered in the first place. As the ceremony progressed, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I couldn't look at Laura for too long, it hurt too much. Every glance felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I couldn't just walk away and pretend like I was fine with it. I needed this moment, this clarity. I needed to see the reality of the situation in front of me. And that's when I realized something. Laura had been playing a game of manipulation, a game of lies. She had convinced herself that what she was doing was the right choice, that Robert was her future, that she had outgrown me. but as I watched her stand beside him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, I saw the cracks in her facade. I saw the hesitation, the uncertainty, the guilt that still lingered beneath the surface. For all her bravado, Laura was just as broken as I was. I didn't know what had driven her to this point, whether it was a loss of love, a desire for something new, or something else entirely. But standing there, watching her marry Robert, I understood one thing: she wasn't the same person I had fallen in love with. The ceremony came to an end, and I watched as they exchanged vows, as they sealed their union with a kiss. I stayed seated, motionless, as they walked down the aisle, the room erupting into applause. I couldn't bring myself to join in. I couldn't pretend that I was happy for them. I couldn't pretend that this wasn't tearing me apart from the inside out. But something else was rising within me too. It wasn't just anger anymore. It wasn't just hurt. There was a sense of clarity, a realization that I had been given a gift of closure, a gift of understanding. I wasn't going to let her walk away from me without consequence. I wasn't going to let her think that she could leave me for another man and live happily ever after. I wasn't going to let this go. As the reception began, I stayed for a while, walking around the room, observing. Laura and Robert were surrounded by their friends, basking in their newlywed glow. They were the center of attention, as they should have been. But I couldn't stop watching them. I couldn't stop watching the way they interacted, the way she leaned into him just a little too much, the way she laughed too loudly at his jokes. She was trying too hard, trying to convince everyone, herself included, that this was where she was meant to be. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. But I knew that this night was far from over. It wasn't about ruining their happiness. It wasn't about making them feel the pain I felt. It was about making Laura understand what she had done, about showing her the consequences of her betrayal. The evening wore on, and eventually, I found myself at the bar, nursing a drink, trying to steady my nerves. I had no real plan, but my thoughts were swirling. There had to be a way for me to make her see how wrong she was, to make her understand the gravity of her decision. It wasn't just about her breaking my heart. It was about the life we had built together, the trust that had been shattered. Then, as fate would have it, I ran into a mutual friend of ours, Sam, a guy I had known for years, someone who had always been a part of our circle. He was a good guy, and I had always enjoyed his company. As soon as I saw him, I knew that this was the moment I had been waiting for. We spoke for a few minutes, catching up on old times, when Sam mentioned something offhand that sent a jolt through my body. "I've seen you here with Laura tonight, man. You know, she looks different, right? She doesn't seem as happy as she's pretending to be." I didn't respond right away, but something in Sam's words stuck with me. He had noticed it too. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the only one who could see the cracks in Laura's facade. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Instead, I would drop the truth. Casually, without fanfare. I would let her know that I had moved on. I would show her, in the most subtle way possible, that I was no longer the man she had left behind. I was James Harper, a writer who had been torn apart and rebuilt. And I wasn't going to let her walk away from me without understanding the cost of her actions. The reception was in full swing by the time I made my move. The room was alive with laughter, music, and the clinking of champagne glasses. But none of it reached me. I stood by the bar, nursing a drink, watching Laura and Robert, who were the center of attention, as newlyweds often are. She had slipped into this new life with ease, her smile wide, her laughter infectious. But something in her eyes, a fleeting moment of discomfort, made it clear she wasn't as happy as she seemed. The cracks were there, but she had perfected the art of pretending they didn't exist. Sam's words from earlier echoed in my mind. She doesn't seem as happy as she's pretending to be. He had noticed it too, and that realization sparked something in me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I wasn't bitter about what had been lost. I had moved beyond that. I was no longer the man who would let this betrayal define him. No, this moment was about reclaiming my dignity, about proving that I was stronger than the man she had discarded. I casually walked over to a group of guests near the dance floor. They were chatting, laughing, and exchanging pleasantries. I overheard a conversation about my writing, something I hadn't really talked about with anyone for months. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and, without hesitation, I joined in. "Did you all hear?" I asked casually, as if I was joining the conversation halfway through. "I've been working on a new book. It's been crazy, but I've got a new bestseller coming out next month. The publishers are going crazy over it." There was a brief silence, then a few polite murmurs of congratulations, but the impact was immediate. I saw Robert's smug smile falter, just for a second, before he covered it up with a forced chuckle. Laura, standing beside him, *** me a glance. One of surprise, maybe even a little discomfort. She hadn't expected me to speak up like that. The truth had hit her harder than I thought it would. I wasn't just a man she could walk away from. I wasn't just the one who was left behind. I was someone who had moved on, who had found success, who had built something without her. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but notice that Laura's smile had faded, replaced by a look of uncertainty. Robert's smugness had slipped, too. I didn't want to tear her down. Not really. I didn't want to make her feel as small as she had made me feel. But I needed her to understand that she had underestimated me. I wasn't her safety net, her fallback. I had become something more, something better than the man she had left behind. And that realization was enough to fuel the fire I had been holding inside for so long. The night dragged on, but I had said what I needed to say. I had planted the seed of doubt in Laura's mind, the seed that would grow into the understanding that I was no longer the man she had left behind. I didn't need to do anything more. I had shown her, in the quietest, most powerful way, that I had moved on. In the weeks that followed, Laura reached out to me a few times. She sent texts, emails, even left me voicemail messages, each one filled with remorse, regret, and excuses. She apologized over and over again, claiming that she had made a mistake, that she was confused, that she had never intended to hurt me. But as I listened to her voice on the other end of the line, I realized something important. I no longer cared. I had no desire to go back to that life. I didn't want to revisit the past, to relive the pain and the lies. I had spent so many years trying to make her happy, trying to fix our marriage, but I had been blinded by the idea that we were meant to be. Now I saw the truth. She had already chosen Robert. She had made her decision long before the wedding, long before the affair. When she showed up at my door one evening, just as I was getting comfortable after a long day, I wasn't surprised. She looked different, tired, worn, as if the weight of what she had done had finally caught up with her. She was still wearing the same clothes from the wedding, her eyes red from crying. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "James, I've made so many mistakes. I've hurt you. I've hurt us. Please, can we talk?" I looked at her, standing there in the doorway, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing. I felt free. "You've already made your choices, Laura," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I don't need to hear any more apologies. I've already moved on. I'm not the man you left behind anymore. You don't get to pull me back into your mess." Her face crumpled at my words and she sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. But I didn't feel pity for her. I didn't feel the desire to fix things, to make it right. For the first time in so long, I felt liberated. "I've let you go, Laura," I continued, my tone steady. "And I'm done. I'm done pretending that what we had was perfect. I'm done holding on to a past that's already gone." I could see the realization wash over her. She had hoped that she could come back, that I would take her in and forgive her. But I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Not for her, not for anyone. As she stood up to leave, I knew that I had closed that chapter of my life. She walked out of my house, her steps slow and hesitant, but I didn't follow her. I didn't try to stop her. And as the door closed behind her, I finally felt a sense of peace settle over me. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long was gone. I was free. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for it. I wasn't looking back anymore. I wasn't waiting for Laura to come back or for Robert to slip up. I had learned the most important lesson of all. I didn't need anyone else to define my happiness. As I sat down at my desk that night, I picked up my pen and began to write again. The words flowed freely, effortlessly. For the first time in a long time, I was writing for myself. And that in itself was enough.